But super excited to get into game week. We've this will be practice number 21 tonight under the lights. It'll be our last one under the lights before we play next Thursday. And just a lot of thought goes into that. Our first 7 practices were at night for a reason. 3 of our first 5 games are at night. So a lot of different things that we did over the last 20 practices to get us ready for this game week. Told our guys we needed to have a great fall camp for 2 reasons. Obviously, the work is in front of us, but what people don't realize, and I shared this with them after they were done, so week 1, we got in about 80 hours of film and practice and walkthrough and meeting times, 80 hours in the first week, 80 hours in the second week, and 80 hours in the third week, which is, for the non-math majors, 240 hours, right? And if you got a 12-game season that lies in front of us, obviously we'd love to play in the postseason, but you can only do 20 hours of work week with them during the college football once classes start, which obviously start on Monday. So that's 240 hours in the season. So it's kind of amazing. You get just as much work in 3 weeks of camp as you do during the course of the fall. So there was critical work that got done. Really excited about that. I'm excited about my staff, support staff, everything from the way our guys are equipped to the way that they're nutritionally taken care of, the way they're medically taken care of. Josh has afforded us the opportunities of that. The world that we're in right now with the ability for analysts and quality control coaches to be on the field with us, I think that has really improved the quality of practice and the look team and the way we can basically function. Also, a byproduct of that is, kids are just much more accessible to our coaches just because of pure numbers, right? They go by and see some of our assistant coaches, the GAs and quality control coaches. Those are having some meetings with our guys, right, that they can kind of have one-offs and better equipped to learn specifically, especially new guys. We have 45 guys that have never been through a fall game with us, right, have never been through a University of Illinois football game. The good news is we have a lot of guys in our building, guys like J.C. Davis, guys Melvin Priestley, Zachary Franklin, on the defensive side of the ball, Briggs, Terrence Brooks, guys that have played a lot of really good football at colleges other than here, but they've been in multi-game starts. So I think that part has been exciting to see their breath, right? Also here at the end, I've opened it up for some of our guys to stand up and talk in front of the team and to hear the character, the demeanor, the personalities that we have in that room, the journeys they've had is really cool. So to jump into Eastern Illinois, have a great respect for Chris, and I know Barry shared his story when this came up, that they were going to be on our schedule. Barry expressed to me and the history they've shared. So a lot of respect for what he's done. First year obviously was some bumps in the road, and then last year to be an 8-3 team that, in realistic, I don't know, never been in FCS, but should have been a playoff team, very, very capable offense, defense, special teams. They have multiple players back. Their whole roster is, when you look at their 2 deep or projected 2 deep on offense, defense, and even in the kicking game, it's all juniors and seniors, guys that have been junior and seniors in their program, but also guys that have transferred in. So a tall task for us to have, but excited to get out here in Memorial Stadium and be a part of it. So with that, I'll open up for questions.
Coach, you mentioned FCS to your guys. Do they talk about them all?
We do, just because of this would be their on their schedule, the marquee game of the year, right? I think you're always going to get a opponent's best every week. I think it's just go, but I think especially for them, Eastern Illinois, a lot of kids on their roster from Illinois. They have a kid on their roster that his dad and I were friends since high school, right? So there's like a lot of these stories. There'll be guys on this team that have people they played with in high school. I think that proximity is good, but we kind of always say respect all, fear none, right? And the message from me as a head coach is the same as we're playing Eastern Illinois, and it will be the same against Kansas, right? You got to learn to play your opponent, but who is your opponent, right? So we're going to look specifically at, we're playing Eastern Illinois, we're against Eastern Illinois' offense, but who is the right guard, who is the left guard? That doesn't change really matter independent of who we play.
Coach, any update on?
What's that?
Where are you guys at from an injury standpoint?
Injury standpoint? As of right now, James Cruz got cleared 2 days ago, so I think he was ready to burn his green jersey. To have 2 Cruz brothers limited in practice is not healthy for anybody. But both James and Josh are back cleared, 100% to go. Josh had limited practice last week, but he's full go for this afternoon or this evening's practice. I know he's excited about that. On the offensive line, everybody's back. On the wide receiver, there isn't any issues. Nobody will be limited from contact or from the scrimmage participation. really the only guys projected to be out that would have played in the game, right, would be the two guys with ACLs, Cole Rusk and Mason Moraga. But other than that, yeah, we're 100%.
Brett, you get 3 or 4 weeks with these guys. It's kind of an open-ended question you can take anywhere. But what did you learn about your team that you didn't know about them before training?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think in camp you learn a lot, right? And first off, voices, right? When I'm out at practice, I usually script on my sheet where I want to go for practice, and a lot of that is obviously I want to watch things, but a lot of times I want to hear things, right? So I think that's a very important point. I think a head coach, you probably recognize it more than others, but if a team that talks well and communicates before the snap and after the snap usually plays very well. So that's communication on the field. But then, we've had all 6 captains got up and addressed the team in an informal team environment. They stand up in front, gave them the podium just like this, and Josh Kreutz started off with a message that is Josh Kreutz, right? And for them to hear that, and the epitome of what that is, he was followed after that by Miles Scott, who, for those in the room, didn't know his story. He talked about coming in as a walk-on, playing on offense, transitioning to defense, and the story that told, right? And then I transitioned over, and Pat Bryant talked, and he talked about coming in, and we had actually signed him without me being the head coach, right? And he told that journey of earning the coach's respect in that first year to where he is today, and it just keeps going on and on. And then the last guy to talk last night was Josh Geske. I had 2 or 3 guys that had wanted to talk, but after he got done talking, the place stood up and went crazy. So I just said, hey, we're going to walk out on this one. It's a walk-off home run. So, I think the voices that we have now in the locker room, our kids made reference to things that as coaches we've said, but also as players to hear. For instance, T-Row, when he spoke, he talked about a conversation that day he had with Luke Altmaier. I think anytime your starting nose is talking to your starting quarterback, I think that's a really big deal, right? So if you want me to say it, I just said it. He's our starting quarterback. Some guys need that formality. But I think that's a really, really big part. And I think, after all these years as a head coach, I think that's something that really jumps out is how does this team talk?
Coach, are there going to be some key indicators coming out of this game that are going to give you an idea of what kind of team you have, what some strengths and weaknesses and that kind of stuff?
Well, I think anytime your game plan matches results, that's a good thing, right? So we won't know that till after we're done, right? I think going into this game, to have as many guys as we have, as I mentioned earlier, that have played some good football for us, but key positions that we got new faces is going to be critical, how they play and how they fit into our scheme. I think of positions of kids that touch the ball. So obviously, all 3 running backs have played, but actually I should say 5. Jordan Anderson, who's had as good a camp as anybody, he's a guy that, I'm excited. He's never touched the ball in a live situation. Khalil Valentine, Tanner Arkin and Henry Boyer, both those guys, I think factor into us. And then we have a young man, Carson Goda, who has been very impressive in fall camp. A wide receiver, obviously we lost 2 players that touch the ball a lot in Isaiah and Casey, but Pat Bryant, Zakari, Malik Elzy has had an incredible camp. Kapka Jones, there's probably 6 to 7 wide receivers that, haven't been involved in a heavy game plan to see kind of how they function. And defensively, to see the new faces up front, I think, and then, kind of sprinkle in these other guys, to see how they play is going to be a key part.
What kind of growth have you seen from Luke this offseason?
Luke Altmaier?
Yep.
Well, first from the offseason, we encouraged, empowered, and tried to create as much as we could for our quarterbacks in general to talk. I think not just Luke, but Donovan, Kirkland Michoud, Trey Petty was in January. So I think that position overall in general has grown in that regard. And then Luke is very talented. I always say this, right? He kind of looks like a guy that's in a pickup game down at the rec league, right? But he can really, really athletically do some things with his feet that are pretty impressive. I think his arm strength is better than it's ever been. His overall strength, his presence, his awareness. I think in year 2 with Barry, he just has a better understanding of our offense, and vice versa. I think Barry probably understands him better. So that happens, and just to be completely honest, the people around him, I think, are much more comfortable to see our kids react to his speech or his talk. To see them react to him during the course of a game, I think is pretty impressive.
Right. Who or what in your career influenced you the most about paying such minute detail to situational football and in-game kind of situations when it comes to a practice?
I've been very blessed, right? So my head coaching resume as an assistant under was first Hayden Fry to Bill Snyder. Hayden Fry to Kirk Ferentz to Bill Snyder to Barry Alvarez to Bill Belichick, right? And those guys are all coaching, and I'd say I take a little bit of that from everything. Coach Fry was more of that's where I learned how to do player talks. That's why every time I go out on the field when a player's injured, because of Coach Fry, he did it. Kirk was probably a guy that really, taught me the stuff that we kind of, I would say, endlessly go over situational football, but because of his NFL background. And then I think it really came to life for me when I went to work with Bill, because Kirk had been under Bill, right? That's how we actually crossed paths and met. So I think the combo platter of those two guys were a huge influence in that regards. But Bill Snyder was, for anybody that's ever been around or seen him, like his attention to detail, his theory was to leave no stone unturned and then go back and turn it over again, right? Like we would do 4 scouting reports on our first opponent. We do one in the winter, one in the spring, one in the summer, and one in the fall, right? And that's just kind of an unwavering process he taught me, and it's been very, very heavy spent since then.
Were you thinking of Coach Fry right there?
What?
Were you thinking of Coach Fry, or
Yeah.
what was going through your head?
Just, it's crazy, right? But like, I think as you get older, you remember things better.
Yeah.
And Coach Fry, we lost him, and I was just on a conversation with some people that Myers Henderson, who is our new assistant, right? So his son, when I got to know Myers, Mark Hendrickson, his dad was my office mate next door to me as an assistant coach, and Myers was just a little guy, and Coach Fry used to call Myers and his brother Davis, who played here, they called him the law firm, right? And lo and behold, when I called Keith and Johnny a law firm, it was because of that. So just had a lot of memories of Coach lately.
Speaking of situational,
What's that?
sorry, speaking of situational football, there's a few rule tweaks this year with first downs and 2-minute warnings, that kind of thing. How big of an adjustment is that for your guys?
Yeah, so I've said it numerous times to this group and to others and to our players, right? The introduction of replay on the sidelines, I think, is an absolutely game changer, especially in the flow of a game. Like, you've never been able to watch video until the day after or until after the game is done. To have that at your fingertips, I think, is going to be priceless in-game adjustments. Coach the player is going to be a huge deal. The biggest ones, I do think, to your point, it's called a 2-minute timeout in football. For us, it's 2-minute warning in the NFL. Why we couldn't call it the same thing, I have no idea. When we had the mock game and the officials here, they're like, hey, it's a 2-minute timeout. I'm like, okay, it's a 2-minute warning. But that one's a big one because, now you have stoppage of plays. So every college football coach, I'm sure, over the last 6 months has been revamping their end of game chart, their end of half chart, because it's a game changer, right? I do think there'll be a dramatic spike in scoring at the end of the second quarter than we've ever seen before. I think it's just going to put more time on the clock, and in today's world offensively, I think that'll be a big deal. I would say that's probably going to be the biggest one. There are some rules and points of emphasis that I think it'll be interesting to see how they play out. But other than that, I'd say those are the 3 big ones.
You mentioned the 45 guys that haven't been through a game
Yeah.
with you. Like, what do you stress to them about this week? Like, what's important?
Well, it's very important to have those last 3 those scrimmages, right? So by NCAA rules, we're allowed 2 full scrimmages. So we were dressed in game day uniforms. We were full functional on the sidelines and up in the booth. And as a rule, we had done that once but never twice. So that's preparing not just our coaches but for sure our players, right? Like, I wanted them to go to the sideline. We did pregame warm-ups. We went in the locker room at halftime. We did everything. So we've literally buttoned it up and made it as tight as we could. And then the mock game on Wednesday night out here, again, made it as realistic as possible. But you really don't know until those bullets are flying how they're going to handle it and react. But I would say the over-preparation has been a good thing.
Coach, second year under Coach Henry on the defensive side, what growth have you seen from him?
As a head coach, you always say your biggest growth in the season is from game 1 to game 2, right? And I really think, as I've been around coaches and especially coordinators, their largest growth comes in the out of season after year 1. They just realize and understand, not that he didn't a year ago, but I think to have a couple new coaches oddly will benefit because it makes you kind of reteach and redefine what you're saying and doing. And so I think that part is there. I think our defensive staff in general is very, very tight. And I think Aaron's learned to rely and lean on them for the things that are there. For me as a head coach, I've witnessed that. And then I think just the overall comfort and flow of understanding, like, when you're an assistant, and even if you carry a title, you kind of hone in on your position. You're affected by everybody, but it doesn't. But now when you're a coordinator, right, and you realize, hey, that D lineman, that second string defensive lineman could be thrust in the action that much faster. I don't think you really realize it until the bullets are flying. So last year, when Johnny Newton was knocked out, in end of the was that second quarter against Wisconsin, right? Like that dramatically changed how the game flowed after that, right? And you got to learn those adjustments, those nuances, and unfortunately, you don't really learn that until you go through it.
Along those lines, Aaron told us just now, we talked about like the season establishment, defensively, and he said established Illinois as a prominent defense. I'm curious how you've seen over the course of the offseason that kind of play out, or emphasize is the right word.
Well, I think, go back to last January, February, March, before we jumped into spring ball, we did a seasonal analysis. Obviously, the easy things are statistics and numbers, but how are we doing things? How are we calling things? I think one of our biggest strengths for us at the University of Illinois is we always got to maximize our strengths and minimize our weaknesses. So obviously with the departure of certain players that were strengths, right, where these new guys step into those roles, you really got to analyze that, right? So whereas before sometimes we created pressure with three-man, now the results, you can't ever replace someone's production, but you can replace their numbers, right? And so like however that comes about, Johnny Newton put a lot of pressure on the quarterback on early downs, right? And set the record, or was the leader in college football for 2 years. That's obviously been a part of our success, right? And for us to do that, we have to, how are we going to create that same type of pressure, right? So those are the little nuances. I know he went into great detail. I heard him preaching from up front here, like on some fundamental things that they believe in defensively, which I think is really good. There's certain things in my entire career as a head coach, you want your defensive coordinator, your defense staff to identify to what they are. We all got to play complementary football, but I think that nuance for him to have a year of perspective has been good.
Brett, after getting to
Time for
evaluate
one more
them,
after this.
the transfers, how big of an impact have they had on the program?
Not just the 1 year transfer, but like T-Rod Edwards, like I forget that we didn't recruit him, right? So he's in his third year, and now he's the pillar of our defense in front, especially. And then he right away identified with Briggs. Those two guys led a defensive line group this summer that has been very impressive, right? But the nuances, the new guys, right? Like it's immediately easy to see. Some of these guys are very talented. I'm excited to see Torrey Cox, right? Like a guy that, maybe the outside world is looking at T. Brooks, and T. Brooks had by far his best week of football since he's been here. Zakari is another one I think has a tremendous amount, but two guys that hopefully they don't get noticed much, because when tackles aren't talked about, that usually means they're pretty good. But really excited to see Melvin Priestley and JC take the field, right? Those guys have been a rock of preparation and diligence, and two completely different people and players, but they have bought in. I think JC's brought a steadiness to the offensive line. I'm excited to see, and Melvin's got a little juice, a little swag, right? That has affected everybody on the offense side. I think players and coaches. So to see that kind of parlay out, I would say overall in the offensive line, I've never seen a group of transfer people come in and make a really good effect. And I think we probably got 7 or 8 offensive line starters. Hunter Whiteneck has had a really, really good camp. To see him, and then Josh Kreutz, when he got injured, I literally said 5 minutes after it happened, I said this could be a blessing, because when I found out he was going to come back quickly, right? I said, hey, to get these other guys to rep has been, so to get TJ, to get Kevin Wigington, and to get we had Brandon Henderson pop in there, to have those guys get 2 weeks of work at the center position has been awesome.
I was going through a list
Finish up with this.
of transfers last night. Indiana's bringing in 31 transfers. Washington 28, Michigan State 25. Other end, Iowa has 4, Penn State 6, Rutgers 6. You're at 11. How do you balance that? Like at the end of camp, do you look at it and say, like, man, I wish I had a couple more transfers, or I should have a little more freshmen we're developing? How do you balance that?
Well, I think, Robert, once we're in camp, the ship is settled, right? I think as a head coach, this world we're evolving into, 105-man rosters and addition and subtraction. I think it's about who can manage their roster the best, right? Like those are numbers from last year, but 2 years ago we may have had fewer. I don't know, this year may have more. I think our numbers jumped just because a couple guys, I didn't foreshadow at this time a year ago. I didn't see Tip Ryman hopping out, right? I thought he would have came back, but he just played himself into a draftable player, and the results of that were there, right? Didn't know if Isaiah Williams at this time a year ago was going to be back. So sometimes numbers can get skewed that way, but for us, we had 9 guys get in the portal in December, that window, right? And then we had 17 get in the portal. Now, not all those were scholarship players, I get it. But when you're trying to track volume, that's a large percentage of new faces, right? And the key is to adapt them and get them to believe in what you, how we do things, but also understand they're coming from a background of history that's the only one they know. So it's really key to find out who they are, how they learn, and fit into our system. So yeah, it is what it is, but I think in fall camp, you can't really do much about it at this point.